I think we can already safely say that this can be considered one of, if not the most unique dungeon crawling anime, and I think potentially could be Studio Trigger's magnum opus. This 24 episode anime, Delicious in Dungeon, we are only 2 episodes in, and I've already seen enough to know that this is going to be an absolutely incredible masterpiece of an anime for me. I love little moments just like looking at something like a basilisk and like this chicken snake hybrid, and just the simple idea that the chicken part was actually from the snake area and the snake area was actually the chicken. It's just the little idea, because if you ask the average person which part of that creature they would want to eat, most people are probably going to say the chicken looking area. And the idea that what we would have ended up eating was actually the snake parts, it's just like, I love little details like those little like pulling the rug from under our feet, not in the way that we're getting pushed down the stairs to kill us, but just more so like, what? And just the fact that already by episode 2, we've already felt like we've developed Marcel as well as Chilchuck, not in the way that like they've massively changed, but like the opening up, knowing them a bit better as a person, as Senshi's just basically chilling with us, cooking these amazing dishes, and honestly, I just think is like one of the best anime characters we've seen in the past few anime seasons. This show's already a banger because you get both simultaneously a dungeon crawling adventure with these very unique monsters, fun fight scenes, and just wild antics, while at the same time getting the most interesting cooking show I think anime's seen in quite a few years. This is without a doubt a 10 out of 10, and I am so excited for more. Of course, I have a full live reaction episode 2 over on my Patreon, so if you would like to see my full and gut thoughts to today's episode, they're over there if you're interested. Now, I've been excited. I think this is my personal favorite show for Thursdays, and I think one of my personal favorite shows of this season. There's a handful of shows that definitely have my interest the most, and Delicious in Dungeon is one of those for sure. It's nice to get that weekly release from Netflix, but I think most importantly, it's just nice to see something that's so expressive, so full of life. And I think while sometimes Studio Trigger is very, like, visibly Studio Trigger, like you just from minute one of looking at a still frame, you're like, that's a Studio Trigger anime. Sometimes they also do shows that feel a bit more normal in nature, and I think in general, if you look at Delicious in Dungeon as like a screen grab, just the characters standing around, it does still feel like a Studio Trigger show, like in terms of how their color palettes are used, how their character models typically look, but it's not as insane just every single second. But where the Studio Trigger vibes really come into play is the animation, like when a character freaks out. And I think, honestly, out of the 4 characters we're currently traveling with, Marcel's probably the one who's there just to suffer the most because her reactions are gold, and the Studio Trigger animation really pops out there. But just the fight scenes, just the fact that we have mandrakes, right? Anyone who's seen any, well, it doesn't matter, like even like pretty popular movie series like Harry Potter or the books, right? Like the fact that there's an anime that was a few years back, I think it was like around 2018 or something like that, called Flying Witch. Mandrakes are pretty common and universal in terms of their screams in most stories, unless the author wants to do something vastly different. And I love the idea that, you know, it's a very simple moment, but I think it really seals the deal that there's probably going to be a lot of easy ways to get ingredients or to get something dead so it's not going to kill us and then we can turn it into a chicken pot pie potentially. The idea that the harder something is and the more steps it takes to get it the proper way, the better it will taste. So our boy Senshi comes in after learning that apparently you have to kill a dog, like 1 dog for 1 mandrake. Jesus Christ. You use the dog in order to pull it up and it dies from the scream and then it kind of loses its cool and then all's well that ends well. And the idea that Senshi just comes in, cuts the head off, says, bet, and I'm like, alright, like why would we do it the stupid book way? Like not only is it cruel to an animal, it just doesn't make sense. And this is where the first moment really pops up that really shows you that this show's more than just look at the crazy if not delicious looking food or what the hell am I looking at food, and then also maybe some fight scenes. No, it's also a character driven series. I mean, as funny as it is to have an MC who I kind of feel like is using the excuse to save his dying sister in a dragon's stomach as basically an excuse to live out his monster fantasy and finally be able to appreciate the craziness that is dungeons. At the end of the day, they do have hearts. It's just very funny that you can have moments where it's like, is she dead? And that's a dead ass reaction to one of your friends potentially being dead, but I digress. So she's very upset and feels useless because if you really do look at episode 1 and then where episode 2 was at as it stood, it does feel like she did a lot less in comparison to main guy as well as our dwarf or dwarf looking character Senshi. So the idea that she's like, I'll prove them, we'll do it the book way. And as she's thinking, she's like, actually the book way does seem like it's a little ridiculous. She uses a monster, so a bat, in order to rip it out. And it's a lot of work. It just was hell. It was hell on earth. But as we see after they cook it, basically the one that she caught was actually way tastier because all the toxins were kind of screamed out of its body. And I love the fact that since she's not this like overly egotistical, like my way or the highway, he simply is like, why would we do it like that when this is the easier way? And he's like, you know what? I lost my way. If it's harder, it usually will taste better. And I love the fact that there's that general like, hey, no character in this series is perfect. All the characters will have their own talents. We have a leader-driven character, we have a cooking-driven character, a traps-driven character, and a magic-driven character as it stands. And the fact that none of them is going to be 100% perfect 100% of the time is pretty great. And I think just the idea of that basilisk and just like, it was a really cool monster. Like, this isn't your generic, here's a slime, here's a golem, here's a skeleton anime. No, this is like, hey, we're gonna do some crazy shit with our monsters, and you're gonna feel like this dungeon is absolutely wild and full of possibilities for culinary delights. If not, do I want to try that? Because that egg, I'm not eating those eggs. That's what I'm saying. The chicken snake thing that looked like a big drumstick, I'd eat that. But those omelets and shit, I ain't touching that with a 10-foot pole. I can't do it. The squishy eggs just feel too weird to me, but that's just me. And then when it came to the second part of the episode, we had Chilchuck, who is kind of like, it seems like he's the type of guy who probably doesn't like being called a kid because all his life for being shorter and probably looking younger than he is has been viewed as immature. So that's clearly a personality quirk to him. So he's the traps guy, right? So he pretty much figures out where to go throughout this room. And then in comes Big Boy, just sets off the traps, and when getting scolded, he just sets them all off. And it's honestly very hilarious, but you can also immediately see how much of a dick move that is. And I like how rather than essentially just being like, you know what, I don't care, he's very interested in the flame. So he's like, I want that oil, we're gonna deep fry some shit. And by the end of that whole exchange, he pretty much apologizes like, you know what, you are good. Like, you definitely have talents that I don't have, and I want to help you learn how to cook a bit better. Maybe you can teach me some things. But at the end of the day, you know what, it's this mutual respect. We don't just keep characters as just something to be walked over. We don't just keep our girl as someone to be a complete meme just to suffer. Like, technically, she does suffer quite a bit. A mixture of her own, like, getting in her own head, this food looks too gross to eat, but I secretly enjoy it, or feeling like, well, I'm not as useful as the other group. They immediately said that, like, you are useful. Like, without your magic in the deeper parts, we're all going to die. So I like the fact that they don't let characters feel too down about themselves, and when it came to Chilchuck, someone who literally they probably would have died crossing that without him, I just like the fact that characters aren't just there to be walked over. We may have funny moments with a dwarf just setting off all the traps, or pretty much, you know, her freaking out and having the best meme faces, but at the end of the day, they are people with feelings, and the anime treats them as such. And that's what makes Delicious in Dungeon so great, is on one hand, you can look at certain aspects of the show as almost a dungeon crawling slice of life, but it's actually a character driven first and foremost, and that's really impressive about this series. I'm absolutely sold on Delicious in Dungeon, especially after episode 2, but let me know what you're feeling, whether on this episode or as a whole as it stands with these past 2 episodes. Are you going to continue watching it? Let me know down below. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new around here, of course ring that bell so you can get notified when I upload more of the channel, and like I mentioned, we have a full live reaction over on my Patreon, and hey, while you're over there, you also get a video shout out. So today we have Sebastian Just, Archillos, Keegan Miller, Reen Beltoff, Adalism, and Ulysses Mendoza. So I appreciate the support, everyone. Please take care and have a good one.